Well, hey, welcome to In the Growth Space. David McGlennon here, and really glad that you've joined me once again. Today's episode is another installment of something that I'm calling Coach's Corner, and it's a conversation with myself and my good friend Andy Hall. Andy is the coach's coach. He is my coach, and he is also a great friend and colleague. And today we're going to talk about a subject that I think is super important for every business leader, and it really does involve growth. And so I'm not going to say too much more because I want us to go ahead and get into that conversation in just a moment. But before we get into that, could I just ask you one thing, one favor, and that is if you would go to your podcast app and rate and review the podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. One of the missions that I have is to impact as many leaders and as many companies as I can to help them to recognize that their people are their most important and precious asset. And so to that end, I would just love to have you rate the podcast, give a short review, just maybe even just share one thing that you've taken from the podcast or one thing that has impacted you from the podcast. That would be really amazing. And you're also going to hear about a program or a revamping of the program, the Emerging Leader Inner Circle. I'm calling it the Emerging Leader Academy. So it's really an addition to the Emerging Leader Inner Circle. We're going to have some details on how you can get in touch with me to find out more about that program, because we've got a holiday offer right now that will be just killer, because it's going to give you the opportunity to put as many of your emerging leaders into this program for one low price. It normally is a per seat or a per person pricing. And so we've decided to just put as many people into this program because, again, we want to fulfill our mission and really make a huge impact with emerging leaders. And so to that end, if you go to the show notes, and you'll find my email there, david@davidmcglennon.com. You can email me and set up a time for us to talk, and we can share a little bit what it takes and what the commitment is from your leaders, from you as a senior leader. And we'll be more than happy to share that with you. So you'll hear more about that in the episode, because it's part of the conversation that Andy and I have about the things that we're working on and how we continue to learn and to grow and to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. All right, enough of me talking. Let's get into this conversation with my friend and colleague, Andy Hall. Well, hello, my friend. Good to have you back on the podcast. This little episode, or this little segment that we're calling Coach's Corner, I think it's kind of cool because it gives you and I a chance to share a little bit about our own growth journey and our own thinking about our own growth journey. And I think, to me, this is going to help others and other leaders to continue to help them get outside of their comfort zone and continue to grow. Welcome to the podcast again, my friend.
Good morning. It's great to be back with you and your listeners. Thanks for having me back again, David. I'm enjoying these segments and the opportunity to riff around some subjects that I know we're both incredibly passionate about and want some of that passion to rub off on your listeners. So great to be back with you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we started recording here today, we were just talking and catching up a little bit, and it really led to an interesting topic because we were talking about some sports that happened over the weekend, and it really became apparent that as we were talking, leadership is so important both in sports and in business. And when we don't prepare leaders and we don't prepare leadership and prepare the next level of leaders, then a company, an organization, a sports team can really lose their legacy and really struggle for a while if they don't have that leadership. so I guess, let's start there. Why do you think that leadership is so important, and really so important that you've invested your life into helping leaders become coaching leaders so that they can help others, really raise their game?
Yeah, it's such a big question and such
I
a big
know.
topic, but
I know.
I always immediately think back to that great John Maxwell quote around leadership is influence, nothing more or nothing less, and
Yeah.
never was there such a simple throwaway line potentially that we can use that I think is so significant and so powerful. Um, and I just often wonder whether, when for those of us that are in leadership positions, whether we stop and think and reflect about um, the opportunity that we have to significantly make a difference in other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I do genuinely feel that that our responsibility as leaders, that it's many, but if there was a number one for me, it really was about our responsibility is to create other leaders.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do we lead and inspire um, the next generation of leaders?
Right.
And we've spoken many times, my friend, about, again, talking about John Maxwell just very briefly. John wrote a very successful book. I know he's written many, but great leaders ask great questions.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and again, there, I don't think there is a more profound line for a leader, because
Yeah.
are we as leaders asking questions
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost? Because I'm not sure always that we do.
Yeah.
And that again should be the foundation of leadership and coaching within leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are asking questions, then actually what's the next level of those questions? So what's the questions that we should be asking?
Yeah.
And that reflection that we did before we went live and hit the record button, my
Mm-hmm.
reflection was, my sporting team back in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
um, over 11 years ago, let their most successful leader, most successful manager of all time retired.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are many people, from all the cross soccer teams in the UK, that their supporters would probably, irrespective whether they were a fan of my club or not, they would probably would say that this guy was one of the greatest of all time.
Wow. Yeah.
And he was, from a sporting perspective. But interesting enough, in those 11 years since he's retired, I've lost count now of how many managers and leaders that soccer team has
Come through.
recruited and fired and recruited and fired and recruited and
Mm.
fired. And we were talking about, we have spoken many times about this subject of succession.
Yes.
And
Yes.
even though this guy, is by far my soccer team's greatest manager of all time, did they prepare for his retirement? He's certainly left a legacy at that soccer club. But and did the leadership board, did they plan for his retirement? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a big argument that, based on the results since, and based on the failure of the leaders or the managers since, which clearly, the football club, the soccer club, have to take some responsibility for.
Right. Right.
There was no evidence that they planned accordingly for, their greatest manager for 20 odd years,
Yeah.
stepping down and retiring.
Hmm.
Um, and they're still potentially paying for that
Right.
in their business 11 years later.
Yeah.
Um, and they are paying financially, because irrespective of whether you look at it as, a sporting franchise or a soccer club, um, sporting franchises, probably make their money. They have their most successful time when it comes to generating income and subsequently profit. I would hazard a guess when they're winning.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
winning
Absolutely.
winning in sport must breed, income. It
Right.
must breed profit.
Yeah.
Because we know that as individuals, we're fickle sporting fans, right? When we win, we want to go along and watch,
Right.
and and purchase something in the shop.
Yep.
But actually, when we start to lose, we stop going. And as happened to me yesterday, it's like I didn't even want to watch it on the TV. I was determined that it wasn't going to spoil my day.
Right,
Um,
right.
and I could have allowed it to if I'd have watched them lose again yesterday. So,
Right.
again, I think, what's the question that should have been asked,
Hmm.
11 years ago in that sporting franchise.
Yeah.
Is just that when that manager said, "Hey, at the end of this season,
Hmm.
I've reached the age where I'm going to stop." The,
Yeah.
the the question by the CEO should have been, you know, what we're going to miss you. Now what's the plan for you stepping into retirement? Who's going to be your successor?
Yeah.
And I don't think there might well have been that question, but it might well have been asked too late.
Well, and I think you just bring up a really good question, or I mean a really good point, and that is that these conversations have to be done well in advance. If it's if it's the year of or the within a year, it's already too late. I mean, I talk with business owners who they'll come to this place and they almost kind of burn out when or they're ready to retire, or they're ready to hand off, and they go, okay, I'm ready to retire. I'm going to do that, in 3 months or 6 months or a year. And I'm telling you, that's too late. I'm working with a client right now who we're really working 5 years out into the future. And I applaud them because they're already thinking about the eventual retirement, and they're planning for it, and they're preparing their leaders. So I think that one of the key elements here that we're talking about is for any business who wants to really secure their legacy and protect their legacy. I think it's all about thinking ahead and anticipating and preparing for that eventual leader to leave. And really
Yeah,
the best and highest performing companies in the world, and for that matter, soccer teams, sports teams, whatever the arena, they are preparing their leaders well in advance. They're preparing their emerging leaders. They're helping their other leaders. We were also talking about the Patriots, and how Bill Belichick has now left the Patriots as their coach, and so has Tom Brady. And I have to believe that the impact of that void of having two high performing leaders who ultimately were coaching within that organization, the impact is it's evident. And so I guess if you're a business leader here today and you're listening to this, how are you preparing? How are you preparing for the next generation of leaders, the next season of leadership? You're not going to be in the position that you're in for forever. I mean, we all have an expiration date. Let's face it. And so I think that that's the topic of our conversation here today, and it's really about how do we prepare. And I think that one of the things I know about you, Andy, is that you've kept yourself going outside of your comfort zone by doing things that you've never done before. And I think that by doing that and creating, for example, I know your flagship program is Leader as a Coach, and being able to create that program was, I mean, that was out of your comfort zone, and that really was something brand new that you did. But it's also it was born out of that desire to prepare next level leaders and to prepare leaders who will preserve a company's legacy, right?
I think, David, as well, that they were that program and a number of things that I've done for the first time this year. I believe have been they've been inspired, or they've been generated by being around, someone like you or somebody like in our inner circle that
Yes.
that has asked the question of me, or put a challenge to me to say, look, you know, we think there's more for you.
Right.
What's your next step? What's your plan?
Yeah.
Um,
So good.
and that's no different. It's interesting. I don't think that's any different to someone that now works as an entrepreneur, or collaborates with people like you than it is actually whether I'm leading a team of 15, 20, or 30 or 40 people,
Right.
because clearly it was the right question for me at the period where I was at. But actually, you know, I don't care what level that you're leading at. Part of your strategic planning has to be, who's my replacement? And
Exactly.
and that question that needs to be asked by me as the leader, by you as the leader,
Yep.
in terms of who's listening to this, and at whatever level you're leading at. And I think perhaps we don't necessarily see that as our responsibility when we're perhaps not necessarily at the top of the leadership tree, but I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah,
Who's your
absolutely.
successor?
Yeah.
Um, you know, who are you going to ensure that when your legacy or this part of your legacy is or this chapter is complete, who are you going to hand it over to ensure that it's the foundation of the next step for that team of people that you're working with?
Right.
What's your plan? I think irrespective of whether you're CEO or whether you're just starting out into your first leadership role,
Yep.
how often are you asked the question within your strategic plan or your plan for this year or the plan for the next few years? Yeah, who's going to be succeeding you when you ultimately move on? And I
Yeah.
think leader as a coach for sure. I think it was grown out of a question by a potential client.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other coaching program that we've also created this year as well was again born out of a mentor saying, what are you going to do next?
Right. Right.
Um, and that sounds such a simple question, but it was incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and the thing I think that you're sharing that's really important for leaders to think about as they're listening here today is being around other people who are high performing, who see things that you don't see, and quite
Mm.
honestly see potential in you that you don't see. It's so important. You and I have talked often about different leaders who we interact with and how much we care about them being more and doing more and actually growing because we see things that they don't see. And
Yeah.
the only way you can do that is have others around you, have a coach, have an inner circle, a mastermind group. And I think that's the beauty of, to be honest, is the beauty of the inner circle groups that we've been a part of and that we've created: the emerging leader inner circle, the advancing leader inner circle, the elite inner circle for those business founders. It's so important to have people around you who will keep us sharp. There's
Mm.
an ancient text that says iron sharpens iron, and it's that idea of that friction that keeps us sharp and keeps us wanting to be more and do more because we have things that we've been put on this earth to do, and so to the extent that we can be around other people and help draw out our full potential, I think that's
Mm.
where I think that's where the beauty lies in this whole idea of leadership.
David, let me ask you a question, if I may.
Yeah,
You
sure.
touched on a few moments ago your emerging leaders program that
Yeah,
I know that you've championed and created and spawned these last few years. But
yeah,
I know that you're working on the next evolution of emerging leaders.
yeah.
Where did the inspiration come from for taking emerging leaders and the academy to the next step for 2025? What was the question that you either asked yourself or someone asked you that's got you working on that right now?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Andy. I mean, I think that it really was born for it was born from my sabbatical. And in that sabbatical, I was asking myself, what areas do I need to up level and look at um, taking either my life or the programs that I'm offering to my clients to that next level. And it really was a question of the question wasn't, hey, this is broken, I need to fix it. So I wasn't talking about like fixing a deficit, but it really was about excellence. It was like, how do I make this even better? How do I serve emerging leaders and the companies that they work for even better. And one of the ways that came to me was that if I wanted to make the program that we have to, even better. So the Emerging Leader Inner Circle is kind of that foundational program that started 6 years ago. I recognized that we spent a portion of that time together, valuable time together, in me teaching some content, me teaching some lessons, some leadership skills. And I thought to myself, well, what if I took that time and actually created a video so that I had a video library of me teaching those skills? Wouldn't that be more helpful and utilize the time that we have together more effectively and be more effective, so that when we're live like this, when we're talking back and forth and we're interacting, we're interacting with the material, we're interacting with the skills, we're practicing the skills, and we have more time to do that. The one thing I know about especially emerging leaders is that they have limited time. They're still in the trenches doing the work. And so
Yeah.
to be able to maximize that time, I wanted to be able to create a way to convey those skills and teach those skills, so that then when we got together, we could actually practice, and I could kind of work with the team in those skills. So that's really the purpose for the Emerging Leader Academy, which essentially is a library of video teaching of skills that I've seen the emerging leaders really need.
And when you're likely to be able to make that available to your clients, what's your plan there?
Well, as this episode comes out, we should be really actually live. We should be ready
Okay.
to roll it out. We're preparing a holiday offer, and
Okay.
one of the things that we're doing for this holiday offer for companies, especially at the end of the year, to be able to prepare for next year, is we want to be able to have as big of an impact as we can. My mission is to impact 1,000 companies before 2030, so that everyone who is working at a company that I'm a part of, that I'm helping grow, has a fulfilling and rich experience. And so I know I'm kind of going off tangent here, but really the answer to your question is right now we'll be able to offer a holiday offer where for one fee, the company that puts their emerging leader in this Emerging Leader Academy will be able to actually put their whole team in, whereas right now it's a per seat fee. But
Okay.
for this holiday offer, there'll be, so if you have 10 people on your emerging leader team, or if you have identified 10 people or 20 people on this emerging leader, it's one fee. So it's going to be a killer deal. It's really a killer offer.
You remind me again of, I think, of a conversation that we had not that long ago about the gift that you can give as a leader to other leaders inside your organization, which clearly, the gift of the Emerging Leader Academy to your team or your team of people clearly is the gift that that could continue to give and give throughout the
Yeah,
course of
for sure.
2025. But it also makes me think about that's not just the most important step of a leader in the space of giving some growth opportunities to your leadership team through the Emerging Leader Academy. But it's not just the importance of funding it, but the importance of being engaged in it as well, in
Yes,
terms of
100%.
what's your role as a leader whilst your leaders are going through some form of leadership development and growth journey with you and the people that support you in that.
Yeah, 100%. I think to be effective, the leader who is investing in their emerging leaders has to be the one who's also holding them accountable to their learning, because without that, people are going to see that. They're going to sense that. They're going to know that, well, this is just another program. This is just another thing or hoop that I've got to go through for my boss. And, they're going to have that
Yeah.
attitude. And if you're going to invest in something like this, if you're going to invest in creating a succession plan, if you're going to invest in a strategic plan of making sure that your emerging leaders are going to protect the legacy of your company, you better hold them accountable, and you better be engaged in helping them, and really play the mentor role to all of
Yeah.
this. It's really a partnership, and that's what I think is so fun about what I get to do, what we get to do, is to be able to come alongside these leaders, these senior leaders. Sometimes they're business owners and founders. Sometimes they're, a senior vice president, and they're leading a team or a division. And whatever the situation is, the chance that we have to come alongside them is just remarkable. And it's one that I don't take lightly either, because I recognize that, especially, the roles that you and I get to play, we become a confidant, and we really become, in some ways, a rudder to the ship of their organization, to be able to help these leaders take their business into the next level. And
Mm.
that's, from something we said earlier, it takes people outside of ourselves to see something that we don't see. So that's the
Yeah.
beauty of having us involved, and being able to keep the company growing. It takes sometimes an outside perspective, and we don't have the political straps, or the confines of
Yeah.
reporting to somebody. I mean, hey, if they don't like what we're doing, they fire us. They let us go, right? No skin off our back.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it really is important for those leaders to be engaged with emerging leaders, and provide that mentorship.
Well, it comes back to where we started. I don't know how long ago. Today on this call, in terms of, you know, a- as a more senior leader in the organization, ride on, and congratulations for you getting your credit card out or writing the check to
Yeah,
support your leadership team. I admire you for doing that. Well done, because many leaders won't. They'll make the excuse that they can't afford right
yeah,
now to
yeah,
to invest in their people, which is, a big mistake in my humble opinion, because the last
yeah,
thing you should ever cut back on or not invest on is your people. But often that next step is, I think, for, again, and I've been there and I've done it in a senior leadership role. It's just like, that let me give the gift of learning and growth, and more leadership skills to my team and my people. And it's like, and then I'm going to walk away. But where we started this morning was, great leaders ask great questions. And,
yeah, exactly.
and what's the coaching question that you're going to ask of your people in their one-to-one, in
Yes.
terms of when we're talking, when we're sitting down and we're reviewing performance, and we're reviewing our team's individual personal development goals.
Mm-hmm.
One of those questions has to be is, so how's it going in the Emerging Leaders, Academy?
Right.
You know,
Right.
what are you, you know, what are you doing? What are you learning? And how often are you showing up?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
because this is going to be a 52-week program. So, and also, let me share with you from my perspective, I don't want there to be anything more important in your calendar each week
Right.
than being on that call with David and that inner circle group learning. So that's, that asking those questions and leading by example, and setting out your stall to your team about what's important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're not asking those questions of your people, in their performance reviews and in their one-to-ones, about how are they getting on with the investment that you've granted with them, get, guess what they'll do? Guess what they'll do? They're all going to be busy guys and girls, that's for sure. And actually, sometimes at an early age, we think, our to-do list or our email inbox is the most important thing, certainly on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
And
Right.
actually, how easy might it be that, if I'm supposed to be part of the Emerging Leaders Academy,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think I've got time to do that today.
Sure. Yeah.
But if I know that my leader's going to ask me about how often I'm attending and
Right.
what am I gaining from it and what am I going to do with it and how am I doing, and I'm going to make sure that's the most important thing I do this week rather than my inbox or my to-do list for sure.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is so it's actually a lesson that we teach, and it's about leading ourselves. And leading
Yeah.
ourselves is really all about honoring our commitments, and it's not even about honoring my commitment to a group or to a program, but it's honoring my commitment to myself and my own
Right.
growth. And how I do that is I protect my time in my calendar. Matter of fact, I remember in a prior episode, not too long ago, I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but we did a Q&A, and we had a question come in from one of our former emerging leader graduates. And as they are growing, they were talking about how to really execute their objectives and achieve their objectives because they're so busy. To your point, they have so many things going on. And my response is you have to protect your time. And this goes for senior leaders as well. So
Yeah.
strategic planning is always a buzzword for senior leaders. And
Sure.
the board of directors wants to see strategic plans. They want to
Mm.
have their strategic plans. But what happens after that? Strategic planning is one thing, but strategic execution, man, that's a totally different animal. And that takes discipline, that takes execution, and it takes accountability. And so we have to honor the commitments that we make to ourselves, to our board, to our leaders, and protect our time. So we've often said, our commitments show up in one of two places, right? Our checkbook or our date book or a calendar. And when we make a commitment that, yeah, I'm going to be part of a program, or if I'm going to be part of a mastermind, or I'm going to do this coaching thing, then I'm going to show up, and I'm going to protect my time, because that's the
Yeah.
most important thing. And it goes counterculture to where we're at right now, because I
Yeah.
think in the culture that we live in, we are so just distracted from all of the
Mm.
buzzes, the dings. Our phones are going off, and mine's not, because I have it in focus mode. And
Right.
that's the beauty that Apple has put together. I'm sure Android has a similar thing, but put it in focus mode, man.
Yeah.
Commit to the things that matter, and when you do that, um, you're going to execute your strategy. You're going to also honor the commitments that you've made to others and to yourself. I'll get off my soapbox now, but you get me fired up here today, Andy.
What a great reminder to your listeners in terms of, when and how are you going to put yourself in focus mode today and this week?
Right on.
You know,
Yeah, right on. Yeah, and I think it's
and what are you gonna do in focus mode when you're in it?
right,
Hmm.
right. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, especially if you're someone who is in control of your own calendar, I
Yeah.
think it's so important to be able to honor those commitments to yourself on your calendar. And even if you aren't, 100% able to manage your entire calendar, there are elements that you do have agency over. There are elements that you have the control over. And I was just talking with a leader on Friday about taking and putting on their calendar blocks of time to be able to have thinking time. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I know that that's the most important thing that a leader can do, is to think and to ask questions of ourselves. So, I'm curious, Andy. You've been asking me a lot of questions. Let me ask you a question real quick. How do you do that for yourself? Because I mean, I think that by us talking here today in this Coach's Corner segment, I want to be able to like give some practical tips and practical application to how we do it in our own lives, in our own business. And so how do you do it? How do you protect your time? How do you create an honoring of your commitments?
Yeah. For me, there's the tool of the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what goes into my calendar is precious,
Yeah.
and nothing goes into my calendar that isn't important to either me or to my people in my inner circle, or my clients.
Yeah.
So and rightly or wrongly, I'm very obedient to my calendar.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
Now, back in the day, in some of my performance reviews, that was sometimes say, "Hey, Andy, you're very inflexible." It's like,
Yes. Yes.
maybe I am, but I know what's important. Um, but the other thing I think it comes back to, and I don't know whether you noticed that you said a word, but it's such a small word, and it's a really important word for me, and it's one that came from a lesson from our mentor Paul Martinelli years and years and years ago, and it was a lesson about choices.
Ah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a simple word that you can just throw away, but it's like, oh my gosh, each and every one of us right now is making a choice to what it is that we're doing right now.
Right. Right.
And if this was live and there was thousands of listeners, on the call right now that could unmute themselves, David,
Yeah.
I know there'd be 10 or 15 or 20 people going, "Are you crazy?" Of course that's not the case. Do
Yeah.
you understand? My boss has told me to do this, and I've got to
Right.
do it's like, yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably going to argue that it's your choice or my choice to decide what to do today,
Yeah.
and right in this moment in time. We have a choice,
We
to
do.
to decide what it is that we're going to do with our time today.
Yeah.
And we've got many, many choices that we could make.
Right.
um you know we could have said this morning, on this call, that when we're recording it, we could have said, "Hey, it's David's birthday today. He's too busy. He's got other things to do." And
Right.
it is David's birthday today. Happy birthday, David.
Thank you.
And but we could have said that we're too busy.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we could have said, that we're too busy. There's something else that's more of an important priority. Could have gone into our calendar.
Mm-hmm.
But we made the choice this morning that we had something that was on our mind, that we
Yeah.
felt really passionate about and was important about, to share with the
Mm-hmm.
thousands of people that listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
So subsequently, we made a choice to put it in our calendar, and we made a choice for
Mm.
this amount of time to talk about it. And that's what I think I would argue to many people on listening right now and tuning in and thinking, when you look at your calendar today, what is it that you're choosing to do? How are you showing up? What's
Yeah.
important to you today? Is it choices that you've made, or is it choices that somebody else has made for you?
Mm.
And are those choices right for you,
Yeah.
with what's important right now?
Yeah. I love
Um,
that. I love that. Yeah, I was just actually kind of thinking through this conversation and creating like 3 points that I've heard us talk about. And the first point that as I reflect on our conversation, the first point is really succession planning starts today. Even if
yeah,
you've just recently been promoted and you're new in a role, you have to begin thinking about who's going to take my place when I move to my next level and when I move to the next role. That may be 2 or 3 years from now. That's cool. But I have to be preparing and I have to be thinking about now I'm a leader. I have to shift my thinking. I have to be investing in other people and helping prepare them. And that needs to take place like now so that when the time comes, we never know when the time comes. There 2 years from now or a year from now, somebody may leave the company and you get tapped on the shoulder and say, okay, you are the president now, or you're the leader of this division now. So we have
yeah,
to be preparing now. And the second thing that I heard us talk about really is the value of preparing leaders, because you mentioned a John Maxwell quote, and I think that another quote that he often says, and it's so true. I've seen this time and time again with companies. Everything, everything rises and falls with leadership. And I've seen both. I've seen companies rise, and it's because of
yeah,
their leadership. It's because their leaders have been so good at doing the things, at executing and helping their people to be the best that they can be. And I've also seen it, not be that way. I've seen the fall.
Yeah.
And so everything does rise and fall on leadership. And so preparing leaders through Leader as a Coach, through the Emerging Leader Academy and Inner Circle, is so important. And then the third thing that I heard us talk about is just choices. As
Yeah.
leaders, we have choices to make. And so we can choose to get outside of our comfort zone or not. And I think, you and I keep each other, it's almost like we push each other outside of our comfort zone, kicking and screaming sometimes, but it's good. It is so
Always
good.
kicking and screaming.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just think that we need each other. We need people like this to be able to help keep us growing. I mean, this podcast is all about growth, in the growth space. If we're going to stay in that growth space, we need to be around. We need to have a coach. We need to have a mastermind group. We need to have others who are going to keep pushing us. And we have all of those things. And so I think that that's the beauty of growth, is it takes other people. It truly does take a village.
Yeah, always.
Yeah,
Absolutely always. Yeah. And and the coach will challenge those choices as well, which is right too. Because actually,
exactly.
when we go and make a choice, if we're working with an inner circle, a mastermind group, or our coach, our coach will challenge some of those things or all of those things that we're being intentional and planning to do, and rightly so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any final thoughts here today, Andy? I know that our time is coming to an end, and this has been a great conversation, because I think it's so impactful for leaders to be thinking about these things, and for those of us who want to continue to grow, to be thinking about succession planning, preparing other leaders, and then choosing the right path that will help us along the way. So any final thoughts, my friend?
I would just say, look, for anybody that's listening right now, is how are you investing in yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? If you look at the calendar today and look forward over the next few weeks and months, with the new year not that far away, we're in
Right.
the fourth quarter now.
Mm.
What's what's your plan for your investment, for your growth,
Yeah.
in 2025? Because it is an inside out job. It has to start with us and you first.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for you? And then actually, if you're blessed enough to have, responsibility for others, you're in a leadership role where you've got responsibility for at least one other person.
Yeah.
You know, when you're thinking about 2025, what's your plan for their leadership growth as well?
Yeah.
And what conversations are you having with her or with him,
Mm.
um, to talk about, what not only what are their financial performance measures in 2025, but what are their personal development measures, and how are they going to grow, and how are they going to become even better in 2025? So that would be my message, I think, for us, to you and I, as two friends and individuals, David, but also to your listeners. What are you doing to invest in yourself in the upcoming year, and what are you doing again to invest in your people? Because without that, the law of vibration tells us that if we're not investing in ourselves and moving forward, by law, we're going
We're
backwards,
going
and none
backwards.
of us want that
Yeah.
as human beings and as leaders.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as always, this conversation has been always it's always invigorating, and I love it, my friend. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being part of Coach's Corner, and just really excited to see where the new year takes both of us and our listeners as well. And I just want to say thanks to the listeners who are tuning in as well. You get a chance to just kind of see how Andy and I talk. Yeah, I mean, this is very typical of our conversations when we're
Every
together
week,
every week.
every week.
It really
In
is.
the
It
calendar, right?
it
In the
is in the
calendar.
calendar. Exactly. Just like we talked, there are a lot of times where I'm sure both of us have a lot other things going on, but it's important, and we make the time and we honor the time. Honoring our commitments is so important. And so thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Thank you for really your desire to grow as well. If you have interest in the programs that we mentioned, either Leader as a Coach, which is a year-long program with Andy and his team, which I'm a part of, or Emerging Leader Academy and the Emerging Leader Inner Circle, just drop me a line, david@davidmcglennon.com. My email will be in the show notes. I know my team puts that in there every week. So drop me a line, drop me a note, and we'll make sure that everyone gets, who are listening to this before the end of 2024. So midnight midnight December 31st, 2024. If you contact me before then, we'll make sure that you get the holiday offers so that you can put as many people as you want to through the Emerging Leader Academy for one price. And but you do need to reach out to me, because I don't let just anybody in. I want to make sure that we carefully vet the people who who are in there and do the things that we talk about. We need leaders who are going to hold other leaders accountable. So I guess that's all for this episode, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, listeners, for being here as well. Until next time, be well.
Take care. Bye, everybody.